question one is, how can I start doing the things that I never seem to get around to? All right. So we're going to start with talking about what happens in our nervous system when right before we sort of what essentially we're talking about here is procrastinating, right? So first we just want to get really, really curious, like, why am I not doing this thing? Like sometimes it's nothing to do with like mindset or socialization or anything. It's just not that important and we're just not going to get around to it. So I want to throw that out there at the very beginning is it just might not be that important. And that's why we never get around to it. For the rest of this, for everything else that I'm going to talk about after this, we're going to assume that you do want to do it. And for some reason that you can't quite identify, you're not able to do it. There's a whole bunch of ways this could be showing up. So we could be in a freeze response where you feel stuck or paralyzed and you can't move forward. And you could be stuck in like self-doubt and indecision where you're afraid of making a mistake. And so we might be trying to figure out all the steps before we take the first step. And so we're just stuck at the starting line because we're so afraid of being wrong about whatever, or wasting our time or whatever it is. That could be one reason. We could be in a flight response where we're just really trying to avoid being uncomfortable. And so we do other things instead. We don't want to, if it's like, let's say you even wanted an exercise routine, right? And you're like, I just want to run a mile a week or jog or walk or whatever it is, right? But like, those first couple times are going to be, it's just not going to feel very good until you start kind of getting in your rhythm or whatever. And so that could be a reason. And so you're going to avoid doing that and you're just going to go work on other things, right? Like my house is super clean or whatever it is, right? That's what I used to do at finals time in college was like my house would get really, really clean because it was the only acceptable activity I would let myself do other than it was the only way I was allowed to procrastinate studying. Or we could be in a fight response. And I love this term that I just discovered when I was putting this episode together called aggressive avoidance. And I was thinking, oh, I think I've done that. Like I don't want to do that. Usually it's like a reaction, like someone else really wants me to do it. And so I'm like aggressively avoiding it just to be difficult. That's definitely been me. I don't know if any of you guys relate to that at all. And then there's one more form, a flop response, which is a form of a freeze response, but more severe, where we're kind of in apathy or like whatever we're trying to do feels insurmountable. So these are the different reasons that we could be procrastinating about it. So you kind of have to figure out like, where you fall in that. So what's going on with our socialization that's triggering our nervous system to have these fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or flop, in this case, responses, right? So women and people socialized as women are validated and praised for your appearance and caretaking. And so we don't get any validation cookies if we're doing something for ourselves. If the thing that you're procrastinating is something for you, it would make total sense that you would do that because no one really praises you for like taking a bubble bath or for fitting in a yoga class or whatever it is, right? Whatever the thing is that you want to do, if it's for you, probably a little part of it is that no one, if I go do something for someone else and they smile, then I get my validation cookies. I get told I'm doing a good job, right? But I don't get them if I'm doing things for myself. Another thing that here is procrastination can just be rest. If you have a whole bunch of activities like the to-do list that never ever ends, like I hear this from all of my clients, my to-do list never ever ends, then sometimes what you're calling procrastination is just taking a break. The problem with that of calling it procrastination is you're shaming yourself for it and you're not really enjoying the time. So it's not as restful and recharging as it could be. And then here's the one that just is like the roughest part of this is we shame ourselves for prioritizing our needs. We might feel selfish. We might feel like we're letting people down. And we shame ourselves for not prioritizing our needs. I should be taking better care of myself. I don't know why I can't just get it together. That's bananas. Like no matter what we do, there's a voice in our heads that we are in control of that's shaming us, no matter what we're choosing to do, which is bananas. All right, let me see. There is some stuff in the chat here. Rebecca said aggressive avoidance. Yeah. Ashley said the double shaming is so brutal, right? That's just like, we have to stop doing that part of it. That is just so unacceptable. All right. Oh, Rebecca said something I constantly ask myself, struggle with is how long of breaks are the right amount? Self-permission, right? And we would have to define right, right? Like we would have to get in and we would have to decide what does right look like? How will I know when I get there? Because otherwise, if it's this sort of undefined thing, then we'll never actually get there because we'll just move the finish line because we're so good at shaming ourselves, right? Okay, so yeah. And Rebecca said that, and I just feel shame. Yeah, it's bananas, like what we can do to ourselves. All right. So the feelings, this is perfect. Thank you for the segue into it, is right. We shame ourselves for not getting something done, which makes it harder to get it done because no bad bitch ever took over the world from a place of shame, right? Like that's not like world conquering energy. That's like lay on the couch energy, right? Of just, that's the, like, I'm going to pull the blankets over my head and just not get out of bed today, right? That's the kind of energy that we're creating when we're shaming ourselves. We also end up feeling frustration and confusion because, and that's really hard to get unstuck from, right? That's creating self-doubt. That's creating a fight response, right? The frustration might lead to anger, which might lead to a fight response, which means we might snap at someone, but we're probably more likely, for people socialized as women, beating ourselves up, figuratively punching ourselves in the face with our words. And then the third feeling that'll come up a lot is overwhelmed. We have so much to do that we end up doing nothing. I do this to myself all the time, and Amy talks me off a ledge because I'm just like, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing this. And then she reminds me of the things that I come on here all the time and teach y'all, and then I get it in check. But it's still that same sort of thing. I'm creating the overwhelm. When I'm telling myself I should be doing all these things, I'm creating that overwhelm. Because if I was telling myself one step at a time, one thing after the other, as long as you're moving forward, you're moving, right? Don't stay, but the overwhelm will keep me stuck because I don't know where to start. Okay, so behaviors that are coming out of it. So, of course, we don't do it when we tell ourselves that we're selfish or lazy or there's no validation cookies. Like, of course, we're not going to do the activity unless we can see it and be like, oh, I can give the validation cookie. Like, good job. Like right now, I'm doing like a very slow spring cleaning of my house. It might take me like 2 months, but it's got me unstuck. I'm like, I'm just going to wipe the dust off. Like yesterday, it was the very top of these things where the cleaner doesn't go. And it was an embarrassing amount of dust. Changed the color of the furniture amount of dust. And I was like, I'm just going to wipe off the top of these two things. It took me 5 minutes. And then tomorrow or today or whatever, I'll pick another really small thing. But that's the way that I'm getting myself unstuck, because the idea of I'm going to spend a whole weekend and just knock this out, like that's not happening. And so I had to find something, and I'll talk about this in a second, that I could give a micro yes to. I'm going to talk about that a lot more in just a sec. So, of course, we avoid doing something if we think we're going to do it wrong. Of course, we will. If we think that something's going to happen and we're going to feel regret, or we're going to feel embarrassed, or we're going to feel shame, or we're going to feel guilt, like, of course, we don't want to do it because we're trying to avoid that feeling. And of course, we need a break from the like endless list of things to do for other people. Of course, we do. All right. So, what happens when all these behaviors are happening, right? We get stuck in a blame and shame cycle, like we were just talking about, right? We think we avoid discomfort by never starting, but the not doing is actually more uncomfortable than the doing. The shame that I felt over the amount of like dust that's on top of things and under the furniture, right, is I would shame myself with that constantly. And it's like a few minutes a day, this is just going to be done, right? That discomfort that I'm trying to avoid is so much greater in not doing than doing it. Ashley said, I just need Gretchen's voice in my ear saying, of course you feel that way. So validating. Yeah, well, maybe we can put it on a recording. Like, of course you do. That makes total sense. This is something I tell myself all the time when I'm trying to like process emotions and calm my nerves. Of course you feel this way. It makes like, how does this make total sense that you feel this way? It's a great way. It's something I teach all my clients more in depth to do. Of a great way to really process your emotions is to validate yourself. Or in some, if you're feeling super anxious, like telling yourself, I am safe or you are safe, depending on which tense makes you feel calmer. But like just coming into your body and letting yourself know that like nothing, like we're not being chased by a lion, we're not in mortal peril right now, like we're safe, right? Okay. So what we're afraid of when we're afraid of doing it wrong is us. Because in the future, we're going to bring out the woulda triplets, shoulda, coulda, and woulda, right? They're going to come in and be like, you should have known better. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't even have tried. If only you would have not been so pathetic, right? The woulda triplets will come in and they will create shame and humiliation and all of the things that we're trying to avoid. But if we can agree in advance that no matter whatever the outcome is, we're going to have our own back, right? We're going to do like Ashley said, where you have whoever's voice in your head saying, of course you feel that way. It makes total sense, right? If you can just say, of course you feel bad. Like that didn't go the way that you thought it would. That was really like, didn't feel good. This doesn't feel good. And just completely validates you. Then you don't have to be afraid because what we're afraid of is us. All right. And then the last outcome is just we never get to enjoy the rest. If we feel like we're procrastinating and we're calling it that and we're shaming ourselves for that, then we don't ever actually get to rest, especially if we have any sort of caretaking activity that's part of like our day-to-day life. If we've got an elderly parent or a smaller child, right, that to-do list never ever ends. And so what happens is we procrastinate, we shame ourselves for it, and we never really get to rest and recharge and enjoy it. Okay. So here are the tips that I've got for you on this one. Okay. So we're going to get into a bunch of like random things today, but I'm super excited. I completely nerd out on this stuff. So I hope you love it too. Okay. So there's a behavioral economist called BJ Fogg, and he's a Stanford professor. And he has a formula that it takes for a behavior to happen, you need motivation, ability, and a trigger to happen all at the same time. So the motivation is something that you don't always have to have. And a confusing thing about motivation, particularly when you're talking about being stuck or procrastinating, is we think the motivation has to come first. It actually doesn't. So let's set motivation aside because I'm going to talk about it in this next little bit, my next bullet point that you can't see, but I can see. So I know I'm going to talk about it next. But the ability, right? So sometimes we think we want to do something, but we don't actually have a plan of how it's going to happen. And then we shame ourselves, right? Oh, I wanted to go walking 3 times this week, but I didn't. But was it in your calendar? When was it going to happen? Where was the attention and planning to make it happen? Or you think I need to get this done today, but like, when is it, did we know, right? So the ability to get things done is something that can be solved with, I need to find this at the right time of day, right? Like there's certain people who are like, for me, if I'm going to do something that requires like heavy thinking and I need to be really focused, that's going to happen in the morning when my ADHD meds are the strongest. And that's the only time it's going to happen. If I want to do something like that and I keep scheduling it at 4 p.m. every day, that's never going to happen for me. And so when is the ability to do the thing? When is that aligned? And then you need a trigger. And this is often the only thing that's missing. So a trigger, would it be, it's actually in your calendar and the reminder comes up, right? Or, like when I'm having my clients work on new thoughts, right? We come up with a bunch of different ways, right? You can set a reminder on your phone. You can put a sticky note on your mirror or on your laptop or whatever, so that you're reminded of this thing that you're working on, right? There's so many different ways, right? You can time and send yourself an email at a specific time, right? There's so many ways to get that trigger to remind yourself to do something. And so that's the piece that's always missing. But when you're looking at like, why isn't this happening? And you're not one of my clients where I can really break this down for you. This is a really simple formula. Behavior equals motivation, ability, and trigger at the same time. They have to happen at the same time. Okay, so let's talk about the motivation piece. Yeah. So there's a woman, Britt Frank. She's got a book called The Science of Stuck, which I love her. I strongly suggest the audiobook because she's very funny also. And so you would enjoy her. You can follow her on Instagram. I do. But she's kind of added a nuance to this that I hadn't ever really considered before is you don't have to understand why you're not doing it. Doesn't matter. Which I was like, what? I'm a mindset coach. I must understand why it doesn't matter. But she's just like, you just need to get to the micro yes. And so for me, with my spring cleaning example, I just had to be like, today you're going to wipe out the bottom of the silverware drawer, and that's going to be it. Today you're going to clean the bottom shelf of the freezer, and that's going to be it. Whatever it is, I need to get that little dopamine hit that comes with that green check mark or checking it off the list or crossing it off. I need that. That's the motivation. That's how the motivation comes second. So if you're thinking about what can I just say yes to, and sometimes, and this is what happens a lot, is it'll seem like it's just too small. It's not even worth doing. That's actually how you know it's the perfect thing. That's the perfect micro yes. If it feels like this wouldn't even be worth my time to do because it wouldn't make a difference, that's your micro yes. Just do that and celebrate it and move on and pick another micro yes the next day. Okay. Also have actually said, and yes, anyone else put something that you've already done on a checklist just so you can cross it off. I do it all the time. All the time. I need it. I need to be able to have it on there. There is a sadness of, especially when you do something that like you've been meaning to do for a while and you discover it wasn't on a list and you were just like, oh, it's like it didn't even happen. So yes. I relate to that one very much. I love that little, I'd live for the green checkmark dopamine hit. Okay. Another little tip is I'm working on this right now from my coach was something that she gave me a thought to work on that I am committed to being radically imperfect. And this is one that I'm using that's like a newer thought that I'm practicing. And I feel so good whenever I think this thought. It's a great way to know that this is the one I need to practice. This is the reminder I need. I am committed to being radically imperfect. It really, like for me, creates a sense of motivation. Ashley says she's getting that tattooed. Yes, do that. All right. And then the last little bit is you can just try a pep talk. What would your inner Lizzo say? Like I have a client right now who she goes running and she's got this harsh inner critic. And she just decided she thought it was stupid. She thinks some of the things that I ask her to do are stupid, which is totally fine. I would have thought they were stupid when they were first introduced to me too. That's a completely reasonable answer. But she's okay, I'm just going to go on a run today and only say nice things to myself. She beat her personal record that day, did it the next day, beat that record. And now she's running for even longer distances. You know, obviously that's sort of outside of what we were working on with her, but the way that she's applying it to different parts of her life and just starting to understand that I can have an inner bully or I can have an inner Lizzo, and which one's going to help me get where I want to go. Right. If I have Lizzo following me around all day, right? Like wait, Ashley said, like my voice in your head, like I have her voice in my head of you are beautiful, you are intelligent, you are like amazing. And I just keep hearing that from her, then that's so much better than my inner critic says, you shouldn't be doing that. What are you doing? This is never going to work. You're an idiot, right? Like just not helpful at all.